Hello and welcome to the Circling the Bases podcast. Yes, we were formerly known as the Roto World Baseball podcast. So don't adjust your set or whatever you're listening to this on. You are in the right place. My name is DJ Short, and I'm joined here as always by Drew Silva. In case you didn't know, we made the switch from Roto World to NBC Sports Edge this week. So this is our first episode in our new reality. And with that change, I had some freedom in what to name the show. And Drew, if you remember, we had some other finalists, but I settled on a name that has some meaning to us. You know, Circling the Bases, of course, was the NBC Sports blog, which eventually became Hardball Talk. So even though things are changing, I think this show is sort of a fun callback in a way.
Yeah, I forget what some of the other finalists for the names were.
They were good, but I think this works for multiple reasons.
Yeah, it's a callback to that blog that you and I both contributed to for a while when we were pulling kind of double duty with that and Roto World, which we were younger men then.
That's for sure.
But yeah, we want to keep these shows. These are our positional preview podcast. I think we want to keep them I don't know, is evergreen the right word? So it's good to have Chris and Colin posting more newsy podcasts throughout these coming weeks. We got a busy couple weeks or busy several weeks ahead. And you and I are going to be tackling these positional preview shows, and then they'll handle kind of all the headline breaking news as we move into the start of spring training.
Yeah. So like Drew said, strictly a position preview episode here. And it's appropriate because we've officially reached fantasy baseball time. The NBC Sports Edge Fantasy Baseball magazine is in stores this week. The online guide is going live Friday, so a very busy time. If you want to check out the online guide, go to nbcsportsedge.com/MLB draft guide. So let's get into this. We're recording Thursday, February 11th, just to give you a reference point here. And we're going to kick off our coverage here with a long look at first base. We're going to do one episode per position. And the hope is that these episodes will be a reference point for the weeks ahead during your draft, something you can listen to hopefully weeks from now. So Drew, just to start things off here, how are you feeling about the state of the first base position? I feel like things drop off pretty fast as far as the sure things, and then maybe you could wait a little bit.
Yeah, totally. It's always a fairly deep position. But if you were playing fantasy baseball in the early 2000s, you're used to the premier sluggers in the game playing first base, and it's not really that way anymore. You see that in free agency, the way first base DH guys are just not as valued. There's power everywhere at every position. There's no glove only positions at this point in modern baseball. First base, there's some sluggers, there's some real power bats, but it's doesn't have the depth of overall studs that I think it used to have when, fantasy baseball really started.
And let's just touch on this briefly. There was a report this week that MLB basically essentially acknowledged that Rawlings is deadening the ball slightly. It'll be less bouncy or whatever the case may be. They said it should just have a slight impact, but we won't know until the season begins. But keeping that in mind, that kind of levels the playing field. Maybe it forces you to look at some other players differently who may have gotten a little bit lucky in the power department. I'm looking at you, DJ LeMahieu, but I think it'll make things interesting as far as the context of all these numbers that we've seen. And it was hard enough to evaluate 2020, but this just adds another interesting wrinkle.
Yeah, I don't know what to think about that story, honestly. What are they going to do exactly? What effect is it going to have? And I don't feel like I'm smart enough to know who it affects more. I've been reading up a lot about it, and there are guys who look at expected home run percentage, and we'll get into a few of those guys, especially at the second base position, which we're doing next. I guess we're trying to we're recording 2 shows a night essentially. But yeah, I think for these first base guys, they're mostly, especially at the top tiers, they're dudes who hit the ball hard, and it shouldn't affect them as much, percentage wise. Everyone's going to be affected by it, I suppose. But yeah, we're going to have to get into the season to actually find out what kind of effect that's going to have.
Okay, so we're going to start this out with Drew reading his top 12 first basemen, and we'll kind of go from there. And as we go through these players, I'll say where maybe I disagree with Drew's list, but the floor is yours, Drew.
All right. Number 1 first baseman, Greg Bird.
Colorado.
I know, right? Obviously kidding. But number 1, Freddie Freeman. 2, Cody Bellinger. 3, DJ LeMahieu. I guess we should preface this too. These are all guys who are eligible at first base, so not necessarily pure first baseman.
Right.
I think if you play fantasy baseball, you know that. Number 3, DJ LeMahieu. Number 4, Luke Voigt. Number 5, Pete Alonso. 6, Jose Abreu. 7, Matt Olson. 8, Max Muncy. 9, Paul Goldschmidt. 10, Anthony Rizzo. 11, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., 12, Alec Baum. My list goes deeper than that, obviously, but I don't want to bore the people and list off 20 names.
Yeah, I get it.
I say we just get into it. I mean, Freddie Freeman, pretty obvious. Number 1, I assume he's your number 1 first baseman.
He is, yeah. And I don't know if it's like super easy, I think if you're going maybe on upside, you would put Bellinger ahead a little bit. With the power and the speed, Bellinger could steal 15 bases easily with how fast he is. But I think there's more volatility there. And, I think when you're picking early and, Freeman might be a late first round pick this year, probably more likely he's in the turn, early second round. Bellinger probably in that area too. I always just want safety. I don't necessarily want the player who's going to have the most amazing season. That's not what I'm forecasting. But with Freeman, you're getting that consistency. If 295 career batting average, yes, coming off a career year, but you can generally bank on 30 homers, 100 RBIs, 100 runs scored. He'll even steal a few bases too. He's not a complete zero in that area. And I still love the Braves lineup, bringing back Marcell Ozuna. So I think if you want to play it safe, Freeman's the way to go, but there's certainly a case for Bellinger too.
Yeah, Freeman, the National League MVP last year, 341 batting average, 1102 OPS, 37 extra base hits in 60 games, which is pretty incredible. Led the majors in doubles with 23. I think the batting average really stands out among like the pure first base options. Like LeMahieu could probably hit close to that. Maybe Bellinger even too, but I think Freeman is like a lock to at least hit 300 and maybe quite a bit higher than that. I think, which gives you a pretty significant leg up in that category at this position. Plus, like you said, the potential for RBIs and runs scored in that Braves lineup, surrounded by Ronald Acuna and Ozuna's back, and Ozzie Albies is definitely due for a bounce back, in my opinion. Travis d'Arnaud, Dansby Swanson, Austin Riley. Freeman has 174 RBIs and 164 runs scored since the beginning of 2019, and obviously with the shortened season. I mean, it's an incredible pace, but I think he can keep it up. Yeah, the top of that lineup has clicked to an incredible degree, and I guess they'll be around now with that Ozuna deal and the Albies and Acuna extensions, and I think Freeman is going to get an extension soon too. So this could be a long run of those 4 dudes playing together in that 1, 2, 3, 4 spot. I guess we'll see where Albies hits, but I mean, I think Freeman is just going to clean up with the counting stats. Not the biggest home run upside on the board, but just super solid all around. Is going to really help you in 4 categories, everything but steals.
So Bellinger last year hit 239, 12 homers over 56 games. Disappointing after what he did in 2019. And, there was the weird stuff about him changing his swing or his stance, injured his shoulder during the World Series on that home run celebration, and actually needed surgery on that. And I heard the other day he's only progressed to taking one-handed swings so far. I don't think there's any doubt he'll be ready for the season, but just one more mark against him potentially if you're splitting hairs between these guys. But it was nice to see him remain steady with the plate discipline that he showed in 2019. So I think we should feel good about that. And even though he did hit 239 last season, you look at Baseball Savant, his XBA was 284. So I don't think he's a 239 hitter. He might not be a 300 hitter necessarily, but I think the batting average will bounce back. The lineup's awesome. He's a bit more dynamic than Freeman. Like I said, he could steal 15 bases easily. So I think these are the clear 1-2 at the first base position, but it gets trickier from here on, especially, you get to LeMahieu, and I know people are going to knock him. You look at the average home run distance leaders, like that's kind of what I've been looking at over the past few days. LeMahieu figures heavily in that. I can't remember if he's like third lowest or whatever the case may be, but he's still in Yankee Stadium. He's in the Yankees lineup. He never strikes out. I feel pretty confident. Maybe he doesn't hit 30 homers, but he can hit 20. He'll score 100 runs, maybe knock in 100 runs too in that lineup. So I think he's going to be valuable. But the question with someone like LeMahieu, and we'll get into him in the second base episode, maybe a little bit more, is where do you use him best on your fantasy team? For me, I'm not sure it's first base. Like maybe second base is better, So, it's a bit tricky with LeMahieu.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a snake draft where you're kind of just beholden to where your slot is, maybe you do use him at first base, but that's not really. Yeah, that wouldn't be the mindset I would carry going into a draft. And if I'm selecting him, I'm thinking about using him at second base or even third over first base. Then again, like second base is deep. It's not as like I don't know, star heavy, but it's deep. So I don't know, maybe there's like hidden value there, and we will get into that. What do you think about me having Luke Voit at number 4? Is that controversial?
I don't know if like that's the Cardinals fan talking, or
why would a Cardinals fan be rooting for Luke Voit?
Why wouldn't you?
All right. I do root for Luke Voit. He is from St. Louis, so
I don't think it's crazy. It's tough for me because I actually have Jose Abreu 4th, but I hated it. Like I
figured, yeah. I mean, I think he'll probably be the second pure first baseman off the board in most standard leagues. Abreu's ADP on NFBC or NFC, whatever you want to call it these days,
36.40. So you're paying for what he did last year. You're essentially expecting him to be a 3rd round pick. To me, it's just too early. It's just too early. And that's even acknowledging like last year, Abreu was elite in terms of average exit velocity, hard hit percentage, barrel percentage, and he's in a great lineup. He's going to rack up a ton of RBIs, but he's 34 years old. It could drop off at any time. You're going to be paying full price for what he did last year. It just makes me a little nervous where maybe you don't want to take another first baseman in the 3rd round, but you could fill another area need and wait and get someone who could, give you quite a bit of upside, especially when you're looking at Luke Voit, 62.14. I was just saying with Abreu, 36.4. I mean, that's like a 2-round difference right there. So,
yeah, I mean, there's no denying Abreu, the metrics and the baseball card stats both say it was a great 2 months, but it was 2 months. Like, is he a 317 batting average guy over a full season at age 34? I mean, I do think he should be at or near the top of the RBI leaderboard, like once again, given what surrounds him in that White Sox lineup. But yeah, I just don't fully trust what we saw from him individually. Remember, he got to face a lot of bad pitching in the AL Central and NL Central, and the schedule will go back to normal this season, at least hopefully. That geographic-based schedule stuff that we saw last year will have, I think, a bigger bearing on the pitchers once we do that episode. But it's worth keeping in mind for everybody. Like, it was a huge advantage to be a player in the Central. And I don't know, the RBI upside with Abreu is certainly intriguing, but that's not a projectable stat for me. Like it's so teammate dependent, and he does have great teammates. But just going back to Voit, I mean, I'd love to see him come at somewhat of a discount, and it sounds like he is. I mean, he led the majors in home runs last year despite battling a heel issue down the stretch. 22 homers, 52 RBIs in 56 games. He's got a 915 OPS since the Yankees acquired him from my Cardinals in mid-2018. I just love the lineup around him. He's, this is a large sample size of him being a a 900 OPS guy with huge power potential.
Yep.
And I think the heel issue is hopefully something that he can just move past. If it's like chronic plantar fasciitis, we've seen that like tank the back end of Albert Pujols' career.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about that.
Yeah.
I guess I'm talking about that as someone who has plantar fasciitis.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah. It's something that lingers, man. Like,
yeah.
I could go 2 months without feeling anything, and then I go run outside for a half hour, and I come back inside, my foot's killing me for a couple of days. Like, it's something that you think you might be past, and he did get a PRP injection during the off season. He's already been running in spikes, running the bases, says he feels fine. That was just a few days ago. But like, this is something that can crop back up and hamper you. And it's not something that just like goes away super easy. It's something that tends to linger and come back up. So maybe that's why the ADP slipped a little bit. I don't know, but I think it's a little curious that he's at 62.14.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think the power potential is huge, and the RBI upside there is just as good as Abreu, I have to say.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. I'd Pete Alonso 5, so I'd Voit 4, Pete Alonso 5, Abreu 6. These guys are kind of bunched together for me, though, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I agree, and I kind of feel similar, like with Matt Olson, even though I know he hit under 200, but like,
yeah,
Pete Alonso. Sort of a disappointment last year. He came on really strong at the end, and I have Pete Alonso 5. I have Abreu 4, Alonso 5, Voit 6. So they are kind of all interchangeable, like you were saying. But yeah, I mean, Alonso came on strong toward the very end to end up posting like semi-respectable numbers: 16 homers, 817 OPS over 57 games. Of course, had 53 homers, a rookie record in 2019. So 69 home runs over 218 games, since coming into the league. And last year, still hit the ball plenty hard, hits plenty of fly balls, was adjusting to the DH spot last season. So maybe that was like a factor, because he seems to be someone that's very like cerebral.
Yeah, we talked about that. Emotional player.
Wants to be involved in the game. So maybe it was hard for him to adjust to being a DH. We still don't know if there's going to be a DH this season. As of now, it seems no, but I still don't believe that.
Yeah, I agree.
So, that could be more uncertainty with his profile going into this year. But like, if I had to guess off the top of my head, like who's a good bet to lead the majors in homers this year, Pete Alonso is as good as any guess that you can make. Which is why I wouldn't let him slip too far, even though I would compare him a little bit to Matt Olson and his power potential too.
Yeah, I mean, Alonso, the home run upside, the increased potential in the more teammate-dependent fantasy scoring categories with Francisco Lindor coming aboard and, to a lesser extent, James McCann. I see him having a big year, age 26 season. This is kind of like the physical prime. I know it's probably controversial to rank him above Abreu, who I had 6th, but I'm doing it, because I'm a hot take specialist.
Well, I mean, the thing is, Abreu won't last past Alonso in like any probably standard draft. But if anything, you're just saying that you probably won't have a lot of Jose Abreu this year. And I probably won't either, unless he slips a little bit farther. So I have Matt Olson 7th. I was just talking about him a little bit. And on the surface, maybe this looks a little high because, hit 195 last year, but still hit 14 home runs in 60 games. You project that out over 162, that's approaching 40 homers, maybe. 89.66 ADP for him on NFC. With Olson, the strikeout rate shot up to 31.4% last season. It was at 25.2% in 2019. The contact rate was well down as well, 68.1%. He was at 75% in 2019. But again, it was a small sample, lots of weird stuff going on. I don't think he's ever going to be a batting average guy, but he still hit the ball incredibly hard when he made contact. You look at Baseball Savant, Olson was in the 91st percentile in average exit velocity, 82nd percentile in hard hit percentage, 84th in barrel percentage. And like I just said, it wouldn't be shocking if he produced on a similar level as Alonso or Voit. He could be a dark horse for the home run title in the AL easily.
Yeah, I was so high on Olson this time last year that I'm not going to drop him too far after a 60-game season.
Yeah,
that's just giving way too much credit to those numbers. And yeah, he had that 195 batting average, but it came with a 227 batting average on balls in play. Over the course of a full season, he would have found some better luck, and the rate stats would have improved. Turns 27 in late March, has averaged 41 homers and 105 RBIs for every 162 games played since the beginning of 2017. I'm kind of disappointed that the A's haven't done anything to improve, but I'm also not surprised. I still like that team. I mean, they're the reigning AL West champs. I still think the lineup's pretty dynamic.
Elvis Andrus not doing it for you?
Not really. It's fine. They needed something, but I have Max Muncy 8.
Same here.
Okay, and I think this would sort of be the end of my second tier. Like Muncy just slips in there. We both liked him a lot last spring. I know that before the world changed, and he went out and batted just 192 in 248 plate appearances once the regular season finally got going. Had a great postseason though, like most of the Dodgers did, especially in the NLCS and the World Series. And going back to batting average on balls in play, Muncy's was 203. Obviously, that is a lot of bad luck, and like I said, there wasn't enough time for those rate stats to recover from that. Still showed some power with 12 homers. He moved all around the Dodgers lineup, which is probably going to happen again. That's kind of the Dodgers modus operandi, but he does, he gets turns in the number 3 spot in that cleanup and is surrounded by talent everywhere. ADP of 96 right now on NFC. That's super enticing to me from a value standpoint. I think people are dropping him too far. I mean, he was tremendous in 2018 and 2019.
The thing about Muncy that you have to take into account is that he fractured his left ring finger during summer camp. You really have to put his numbers into context, and especially you look at something like his line drive rate. Per Fangraphs, he was at 13.8%, which is really, really low. He was at 23.5% with his line drive rate in 2019. An off season to rest that, coming back strong. I don't think he's not going to be a high average guy, but I don't see him hitting under 200 again, and still managed to hit 12 homers in 58 games last year. Power, on base ability in a really good lineup, great lineup, multi-position eligibility as well. Second base, third base in some formats. So I think he's a really nice find late.
Number 9, I had Paul Goldschmidt. We talked about this on the episode where we were breaking down the Nolan Arenado trade, that I think everybody in the top half of the Cardinals lineup probably deserves a small boost to their fantasy projections. Tommy Edman at leadoff, Goldschmidt probably hitting second, then Arenado third, and Dylan Carlson or Paul DeJong at 4 and 5. I like all those players a little bit more than I did before they got Arenado. I mean, it wasn't all that long ago that Goldschmidt ranked as the very best first baseman on the board. That was back when he was stealing bases, and he only has 4 steals in 219 games since that trade to the Cardinals. He also hit just 6 home runs in 231 plate appearances last year. Despite some pretty encouraging metrics and rate stats, it's just Busch Stadium is a really hard place to hit homers, which goes to Arenado's case too. But I see Goldschmidt being like a 290 hitter with a good amount of runs scored and RBIs. The problem is you can't really project him for a whole lot more than 30 homers, I think, which is an issue.
Yeah, I mean, the plate discipline was awesome and kind of different than what we've seen over the past couple of years. 16% walk rate, brought his strikeout rate all the way down to 18.6%. He was at 24.3% in 2019. Contact rate was up. Line drive rate was up. So, if he can be a high average, high on base guy, maybe he doesn't hit 30 homers again. But that's still valuable, especially with Arenado in that lineup. Arenado in that lineup now. He's not an elite contributor in the areas that are power metrics anymore. Barrel percentage, average exit velocity. He used to be a monster in that area. So I'm a little wary to project even 30 homers. The stolen base is not there either. So he's not the Goldschmidt that I think maybe more casual fantasy players are used to seeing. But I still think there's value here. Basically, he's not even necessarily being viewed as a top 100 player, at least kind of fringy at this point.
Yeah, like just inside the top 100.
Yeah, so I mean, I think he's a nice, like, safe player that you can get late here, and you can pretty much generally expect him to be useful.
And maybe like is less affected by the dead end ball. Just if he's just going to be a line drive guy, like that's fine.
Yeah, old man skills, that's good.
Yeah, old man strength. I had 10 Anthony Rizzo. I don't know. As of this moment, like the Cubs haven't really done the full teardown like we thought they might after the Yu Darvish trade. Maybe the interest in Chris Bryant and Wilson Contreras will pick up this spring. We've heard rumors about Bryant to the Mets recently. We'll see if that comes to fruition. And Jason Hayward would seem to be a good trade candidate too, if anyone's willing to take on the final 3 years of that pretty bad deal. But for now, that offense actually looks, legit. Happ, Rizzo, Bryant, Contreras, Baez, new addition, and Jock Peterson. Nico Horner maybe takes a step forward. Hayward had a good year at the plate. So I don't know. Rizzo's not going to be a 222 hitter over a full season. Like there's no evidence of that. That was his batting average last year in the shortened season. And I don't know, for however long the Cubs keep the band together, there should be RBIs and runs scored for him to rack up. The problem with him is like what's the home run ceiling at this point in his career? It's like probably 25. I would say it's definitely under 30.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's if all goes well, useful batting average, high on base percentage kind of guy. You look at last year, the thing that stuck out to me, 218 BABIP, 286 career BABIP. I think that'll probably bounce back over a larger sample. He had a strangely high infield fly ball rate last year. It was almost like 20%. I mean, that's not going to happen over a full season. I think we'll see that bounce back. Batting average was a little bit strange. He was down a little bit in terms of, all the power metrics, exit velocity, hard hit percentage, barrel percentage. But his max exit velocity last season was 114.5 miles per hour, which is actually the highest of his career. So like he still has it in him to be a force on the power front. Maybe not 30 homers, but 25, I think, is a reasonable expectation. And we know he has that elite plate discipline. So I think the batting average will bounce back. And sort of basically him and Goldschmidt are like back to back as far as ADP is concerned. And I think that's probably a reasonable.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Reasonable expectation.
Yeah. Vlad Jr. had 11. I had him. I'm really looking forward to another spring of wide variance on where he should be drafted.
I have him 9th, and I was like,
wow.
I don't even want to put him 9th. But
see, you're usually more down on him than even I am.
Yeah, I think I just put him ahead of Goldschmidt and Rizzo because like I think they're
upside.
They're like kind of boring but useful. While I still think Vlad has that upside ability that he hasn't tapped into yet, but like I'm not going to get him at 90th overall, which is like maybe where I have him in my head. His ADP on NFC right now is 56.35. There's no way I'm going to probably have him on most of my teams. I think, I will try to probably get Vlad somewhere on the off chance that he, finally realizes his potential this season, but he just hasn't earned it yet. And I don't understand why he's this high.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be willing to take the chance on a possible breakout in like the 6th or 7th round.
Yeah.
But I can't see myself targeting him inside the top 50. He's definitely gotten in better shape. We've seen those pictures, but that was more about an effort to return to third base, which isn't going to happen anymore with the addition of Marcus Semien, and at second base pushing Kevin Biggio over to third base. And like, is a slimmer frame going to help unlock a better launch angle? Has he been focusing too much on cardio? His average launch angle last year was 4.6 degrees, which is like a ground ball most times. Like for reference, Freddie Freeman at the top of these first base rankings had an average launch angle of 17.2 last season. Matt Olson 19.6. And at the very top of that launch angle leaderboard, Mike Trout 23.1, Jose Ramirez 23.2, Vlad Jr. at 4.6. Like, you get the picture. He's got to make some changes. And I don't trust a top 50 pick or even like a top 60 pick to see if that happens this season.
Do you remember when Vlad was coming up? Like, I feel like as a prospect, he was like one of the most scrutinized prospects we've seen in a long time, just as far as exposure. Like, we knew so much about him before he came up. Was there any talk about this launch angle stuff when he was a prospect? Like, I don't remember that at all.
No, neither do I. But hitting AA and high A pitching is a lot easier than hitting major league pitching.
Yeah. I mean, we should say, like, Vlad Jr. hits the ball hard. I mean, he was in the 93rd percentile in hard hit percentage and average exit velocity last season. But yeah, I mean, the problem is too much of that's on the ground, and that's not going to do anything in the power department. And through his first 183 games in the majors, 24 homers, 778 OPS. I mean, you can get that kind of production, I don't know, 100, 200 picks from now. You really could, because there's so many first base DH types, like you were saying, that are kind of like bouncing from team to team all the time. And that's kind of what we're looking at. I mean, Vlad Jr. will be 22 in March, so we do have to kind of grade this on a curve a little bit. Still plenty of time for him to get there. I'm not dismissing that possibility.
Yeah.
But you're paying for something that hasn't happened yet if you're taking him at 56.35, and I'm just not going to do that.
Yep. I think we're both on the same page, and it's going to stink when he does break out and we don't have him.
That's true.
So Alec Baum at 12, I mean, he got in 7 games at first base last year as a rookie, 6 starts. So I guess he'll have eligibility there on some sites. Like, sites are doing it differently, about their qualifications for how a player qualifies for a specific position. I think we can just dig into his profile more when we break down the third baseman. So if you want a big Alec Baum breakdown, maybe just tune into our third base show. Is that cool if we just...
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. So 12 for me, I have Josh Bell. And his ADP is 166.7. So he's not getting any benefit of the doubt after his terrible season last year. He had 226, 8 homers, 669 over 57 games, 669 OPS over 57 games with the Pirates. Now heads to the Nationals in a trade, which I love. Kyle Schwarber, of course, also added in the middle of the lineup there for Washington, which they were lacking in firepower beyond Juan Soto and Trey Turner last year. So that lineup already looking a lot better. Bell actually didn't finish strong in 2019 either, but altogether hit 277, 37 homers, 116 RBIs, 936 OPS, and that was just over 143 games. He didn't play a full 162. Now, Bell is one of those guys who has spoken about a lack of in-game video hurting him. We know that was not something that players could do last year for multiple reasons, but it was announced this week that that's going to return some element of that. That was confirmed. So that's really great news for Josh Bell. Good news for JD Martinez, Christian Yelich, any number of players we don't even know about who may have struggled. But those are some of the high profile names. You look at the spike in the strikeout rate for Josh Bell, which is a little weird because he really hadn't struck out at that level in the majors or in the minors for that matter. The launch angle took a sharp drop. And the Nationals have talked about a flaw in his swing that they've already found, and they're trying to fix that. So I'm buying in on a big rebound here with the Nationals. The supporting cast there, Juan Soto maybe hitting right in front of him. He's getting on base, 43% of the time. So I think, you can buy Bell pretty late, and I think there's a lot of, profit potential at 166.7 ADP.
Yeah, I mean, you laid it all out there. I agree with everything. You go from hitting behind Adam Frazier and Brian Reynolds and Kevin Newman to, hitting around Juan Soto and Trey Turner and Kyle Schwarber. I think there's some obvious bounce back potential there. The metrics and the traditional stats have both been ugly. We'll see, but I think he's worth taking a chance on around pick 170. I had him 13. I had Eric Hosmer 14. Hosmer's his year-over-year numbers are so up and down. It's almost hard to trust that anything from the previous season will leak over into the following season.
Yeah.
And as we'll continue to question again and again on these episodes, like how much stock do you put into anything from 2020? But his launch angle was at a career high, which is something we've been dying to see him work on forever. And the hard hit rate, exit velocity, expected slugging percentage, all in the 80th percentile or above. The problem is, like, he has to maintain all that progress. And maybe he does, and he could be the cleanup hitter for one of the best all-around teams in baseball in the Padres. So the returns will be quite good on that, but it also feels like we've been down this road before with Hosmer.
I think this might be the first year that I may try to buy on Hosmer, and it's been a long time since I've done that. He did hit some more fly balls last season, which was nice to see. It was only 2 months though, so I don't know how much I really believe it, but like, even when he wasn't hitting the ball in the air, like, he could still drive in 100 runs. And especially in this Padres lineup, which I like a lot, if he's hitting the middle, if he hits 300 and maybe 20 homers, he could drive in 100 runs. And if you're getting him 136.45 ADP, I mean, that's a great value. I think this year he's someone I might target if I don't get the first baseman I want early.
Yeah, I think he's like a viable starting first baseman in a 12-team league, which I wouldn't have said that, for a while since his like breakout year with the Royals.
Right. So Dom Smith I had 13th, and he has an ADP of 104.89. He's been awesome over the past 2 years. 299, 21 homers, 937 OPS in 139 games. I don't know if this ADP reflects that. And maybe it should. I mean, Baseball Savant was kind of skeptical about his 2019 production, but that wasn't the case last year. He had a 304 XBA, and that was with the 316 batting average. So it bought that high uptick in barrel percentage. He was 86th percentile there. The hard hit rate also went up compared to 2019. Makes plenty of contact. He's not like a strikeout guy, like maybe Pete Alonso is kind of riskier there. But the risk with Smith, I guess, is the playing time. If there isn't a DH, Dom Smith will probably play first base and Pete Alonso will DH if there ends up being a DH. But if not, Smith is going to be, I guess, the primary left fielder, which isn't ideal from a defensive standpoint. Dom Smith is not a left fielder. He can stand there, but he's not a left fielder. So maybe he loses some late inning at bats. That adds up over the course of a season. Maybe loses some starts here and there too. Who knows? I think it makes him a little bit less safe, but certainly I think he has the ability to outdo this ADP.
Yeah, I had Dom Smith at 15, Brandon Belt at 16. I wanted to rank Belt a little higher because he was really good last year, and I think it flew under the radar. And I think the Giants' offense might actually be kind of fun this season. But Belt had heel surgery back in October, and there's a question as to whether he's going to be ready for opening day. So more of a wait and see guy outside of my top 15 for now, with the potential to move up if he does wind up getting into some Cactus League games by like mid-March.
Yeah.
I wanted to highlight Jared Walsh at 17 too. This is me possibly overreacting to a small sample from 2020. Walsh batted 293 with a 971 OPS and 108 plate appearances last season for the Angels, finally translating some of his great offensive numbers from the upper minors into tangible production at the major league level. In 2019 at AAA, he had a 325 batting average, 1109 OPS, 36 home runs, 86 RBIs in 98 games. He's already 27 years old and is like just kind of starting to hit the scene, but he wouldn't be the first late bloomer in baseball history. He's a left-handed hitter, but he can mash against both lefties and righties. Actually had a better OPS at AAA against lefties. I think he'll be the Angels' primary first baseman. There is maybe a playing time concern there. They've got to figure out how to get Albert Pujols in there and Shohei Ohtani. But I don't really trust the health necessarily of either of those guys. I think, Walsh can play a little corner outfield as well if necessary. I think he'll be in the lineup pretty much every day. And he hasn't been a great on-base guy in the majors yet, but he was in the minors, and that could mean a good lineup spot, possibly like in the 2-hole ahead of Mike Trout and Anthony Rendon. he's a sneaky guy that I think could really pop this year. And I know a lot of other fantasy analysts really like him late.
Yeah, I mean he was actually my sleeper in the online version of the draft guide and the magazine, which you can get now. Go to NBCSportsEdge.com to check that out. But yeah, I like Walsh as well. Really massive improvement in his contact rate last year. I know it was a small sample, but based off of what he did in 2019, where he struck out. Looking at the numbers here, he had a 35-6 strikeout to walk ratio in 2019, and struck out just 15 times last season. So huge improvement there. Of course, with the power, 9 homers. I'm into it there. Ryan Mountcastle, I think, is interesting. Was really impressive in a small sample. Gets to call Camden Yards home, other AL East ballparks. I don't think he's like a 30 homer hitter. But he could be like a 275, 20-plus homer guy. I think the Orioles lineup, even though they've gotten rid of some pieces, could be pretty good. Especially with Trey Mancini coming back, who's another name maybe we should talk about too. Missed the entire 2020 season coming back from or getting treatment for colon cancer, but he's already working out in Sarasota. He expects to be good to go for spring training, and Mancini hit 35 homers in 2019. So we shouldn't forget about him. And in fact, we should be rooting for him all the way this season. So, I can't wait to see him this spring. Nate Lowe was traded from the Rays.
You stole my guy. You stole him.
Sorry. Another sleeper if you're looking late here. Big left-handed hitter, 6'4", 220 pounds. Put up great numbers in the minors. Never really got like an extended chance with the Rays. But when he did play, like it was kind of up and down, maybe a little bit erratic, but 11 homers, 77 or 770 OPS over 71 games in the majors so far. The barrel percentage, really intriguing. The plate discipline in the minors was really good. 421 on base percentage over 93 games in AAA in 2019. Granted, that was with the supercharged baseball, but I think he's better than what he's shown in the majors so far, and I think there's serious breakout potential. And he's a guy who has an ADP 334.32, so you could basically get him for free.
Yeah, 2019, like you mentioned, at AAA, 929 OPS, 16 home runs in 93 games. In 2018, between high A, double A, and AAA, a 985 OPS, 27 homers, 102 RBIs in 130 games. I see him being like a popular waiver wire ad at some point. Like he's going to have a big couple first weeks of the season or something. Miguel Sano, I think we have to touch on.
I was about to say his name too. So
I mean, he's so frustrating and he's going to hurt you in batting average, but he makes incredibly hard contact when he does make hard contact, and he's somehow only 27 years old. If he can stay healthy and maybe cut down on the strikeouts a bit, he should far outpace his ADP, which is like pick number 200 at the moment.
Wow.
Probably batting 5th in a power pack Twins lineup. He has to stay healthy, and that's been an issue for him throughout his career. But he could be a 40 homer guy if he gets enough.
He could outproduce Matt Olson. Like, he really could, and you could get him 100 picks later.
Yep.
That's just the reality.
It's not a crazy thought. Yep.
Rhys Hoskins is another interesting one. I know he had that elbow surgery, which wasn't Tommy John. It was like a primary repair surgery, which, players can come back faster. I think there's a decent chance he'll be ready for the start of the season. And maybe we'll know a little bit more in a couple of weeks. But 10 homers, 887 OPS over 41 games last season. Never going to be a batting average guy, but I like the power. I like the home stadium. I like the lineup. He could be a top 15 first baseman too.
Yeah, I've liked him in previous years. I don't think I'm going to go there this year just because of the uncertain health. But maybe like middle of the season, his ADP was a little bit higher than it was.
I was a little bit surprised. Yeah,
168, which maybe it's just a name recognition thing, but I think there's some question marks for him at least at the start of the season. Renato Nunez is kind of intriguing. We usually don't talk much about guys who have to settle for minor league contracts, but landed with the Tigers on one of those after getting released by the Orioles to, I guess, like, what were they doing? Freeing up space for Rule 5 draft picks or something?
I suppose so, yeah.
But he should be the everyday first baseman now in Detroit, maybe mixing in a little DH time too. 43 home runs since the beginning of 2019, 26 years old. I think he's a nice deep sleeper. Carlos Santana too, man, old, reliable. Didn't have a great all-around showing in Cleveland during the shortened 2020 season, but still got on base. Had a good clip like he always does. Got a 2-year, $17.5 million deal from the Royals. And
I love that Royals lineup.
I know.
It's like a fun team.
Dude, yeah, a lot of those guys are fun. I mean, they obviously have a bunch of different holes elsewhere, but that lineup's going to produce some exciting fantasy numbers.
So a prospect we should mention, I think there's only really one that's, a super standout. Andrew Vaughn with the White Sox was selected 3rd overall in 2019. He was considered the best pure hitter in that class. And it's not often you see a first baseman drafted that early, which I think speaks to, his potential here. Right-handed hitter, 6 feet tall. He's not super huge or anything, 215 pounds. I'm not sure we're going to see like monster power here. He's not like a 40 homer kind of guy. But a very good hitter, on-base skills. I think there's a really good chance he's one of the first big-time prospects called up this year, maybe late April, something like that. Sometimes we see a wave of those guys.
Do we see a spring training extension kind of thing?
Oh, well, it's possible the White Sox have done that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't rule out that possibility. I really wouldn't, especially because the White Sox have a vacancy at, in the DH first base spot area, which I think they're envisioning he'll fill that, in short order. I think we're going to see him pretty early on.
I agree with you. And I mean, the injuries can happen too. Like a spot could definitely open up for him. He should definitely be on radars.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's all I have. I could talk about a bunch more first.
Yeah, let's just throw names out there. Christian Walker, Joey Votto, Bobby Dahlbeck. I think Evan White could take a step forward. I don't really see him being a big fantasy contributor, more of a defensive first baseman.
Right.
Yuli Gurriel. I mean, we could go on and on. But I think we've touched on most of the guys who are very fantasy relevant, at least in standard leagues.
Right. So that completes our first base preview. Stay tuned on Monday for our next episode, which will be a breakdown on the second base position for the 2021 season. Now, if you like what you're hearing with this show, Circling the Bases, remember that, our new name, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review if you don't mind. Follow us on Twitter if you don't already. I'm at DJ Short. Drew is at Drew Silv. Be safe out there, and we will see you next time.